So, I mean, Dayasagara is no stranger to being on screen, as those of you over a certain age will know. Uh, so I actually used to watch Dayasagara read the news when I was a kid, and I never thought I'd end up having such a rich connection with him. But Dayasagara, sorry, was obviously very well known in media circles and television, and then on Lyric FM as well. But I guess the main story or aspect of Dayasagara I want to communicate is his name. So Dayasagara, I'm rarely stunned into silence. I'm very rarely stunned, but I have been stunned into silence twice in my life, my adult life anyway. And one was the day in Lane, my love, I think it was Dayasagara, where you asked me to privately ordain you to be your preceptor, and I had no response immediately. But anyway, one of the lovely things about being a private preceptor is you get to I hesitate to use the word pick because that feels a bit almost vulgar, but you get to uncover, maybe is a better way of putting it, what someone's true name is, what their myth for their life is now in their life. So you have to dwell with the universe and see what kind of name is emerging for the person you're ordaining, and you give them that name then at their private ordination. And with Dayasagara, it just became really clear to me that the second part of his name was very, very clear very soon after just starting to reflect upon it. So Sagara means ocean. And Tully Mitra mentioned the talk "The Taste of Freedom" earlier today, and that's drawn from a text in the Udana where the Buddha says that enlightenment is like the great and mighty ocean. The Dharma is like the great and mighty ocean. So it's it's a richly used image in Buddhism. But Dayasagara has a quality of the ocean because he's just one of the most. I think he's a man with one of the richest inner experiences that I know of. He has a deep, rich, poetic experience, and he's just deeply, deeply moved by things. He's deeply moved by art. He's deeply moved by friendship. He's deeply moved by meditation. He's deeply moved by study. He's deeply moved by the Dharma. And sometimes I think that it's almost like there's too much richness in there to ever really fully communicate. I wonder sometimes does he get frustrated with having to put it into words, although he's a brilliant communicator as well, it must be said, because you just get the sense of such an inner richness and joy and beauty and appreciation. So that emerged very, very quickly in terms of sitting waiting for his name to become clear. And then the Daya part simply means kindness or love. And Dayasagara is one of the most caring and loving men that you will ever meet. And so his name is that he is an ocean of kindness. And I'm looking forward to us. I was going to say that ocean flowing into us, but I think it's more that we will be soon thrown into the ocean to enjoy the depths, the lovely, warm, mysterious depths of Dayasagara. So, and he's going to talk again, like Pranny Mai, why I am a Buddhist.
Thanks, Rajashura. You taught me a few years back not to demur when you rejoice in me or when anyone rejoices in me. And that's all that's stopping me from demurring now, but it is stopping me. Thank you. Why I'm a Buddhist, as most of you probably know, it's a story we get to tell. We are asked to tell again and again the story of our going for refuge. Why I'm a Buddhist, but it's not really a matter of why is it. It's more a matter of how come. If I say why I'm a Buddhist, it implies I have a reason, that I worked out a reason for being a Buddhist and I've stuck to it. And I mean, as you know, that's not what it's like. And my progress from wherever that was to here has not been linear. It's not been a straight line. It's not been a logical progression from A to B to C to D. It's been a butterfly route. I never knew really where I was going to flutter next. And probably I still don't know. So I thought this evening, instead of trying to construct it as a narrative like that, I'd do a little bit like what Kevin did the other night, and give you a few of the dots on the map of the road I've taken. And I'm not going to even give them in chronological sequence, because that would be to imply a progression, a clear and logical progression. I'll throw them at you and let you join up the dots yourself. One day it may be possible to join them all up, and one day there may be a shape to the whole thing, but probably only at the end. Dot number 1, Barcelona 2003, the morning after the night before. Now, the day before is a story all to itself, which we can't go into now. I'd gone there to interview a great musician, and it was an extraordinary experience. I had a real insight into his genius, I thought. So it seems to me now. I'm pretty sure I did, into his genius, and in that way into the nature of art and music and so on. But let that be. It was definitely and remains a turning point if I look back on it. It was also one of the worst days' work I ever did in my life, because I just sat there open-mouthed looking at him and couldn't think of any questions to ask. There didn't seem to be any questions, but put that aside. I went to bed knowing I hadn't done a good job, and it didn't seem to matter. There was complete acceptance, total acceptance that it was the way it was. I went to bed and I slept for, I think, 9-10 hours, which is unheard of for me. I woke long after breakfast had finished in the hotel, and my colleagues who were getting the early plane back to Dublin had gone. I promised to have breakfast with them. I'd slept through the whole thing, and the feeling of acceptance, that peace of a kind, was still there. I had the whole day in Barcelona. I was going to go, taking the day to do tourism, to do a little butterfly hopping around Barcelona. And in the afternoon, took the train up to Montserrat, there's a monastery up in the hills above Barcelona, behind Barcelona. And I wanted to go there because when I was a little boy, my auntie nun, who was a big figure in my life to the very end of her 97 3/4 years, she had given me, when I was quite young, 9 or 10, a beautiful book, so it seemed to me, of the shrines of Our Lady all over the world. The only two I could remember were Acapulco, I think because I liked the sound of the name, and for some reason I can't fathom, Montserrat. I remembered this black wooden statue of Our Lady of Montserrat. I had no religious interest in it, but I had always, even for long after I stopped being a practicing Christian, I'd kept my fascination for churches and for religious art and religious music, as well as all other kinds of art and music. Nothing came between me and appreciation of all that. So up I went to the monastery, the most imposing church, not a little monastery church, but a cathedral really. And you climb behind the altar. There are stairs that go up the back wall of the church and curve around to a shrine which is right up, way above your head, above the high altar. And the quite small statue of the Virgin is there. And you can see it's encased in glass. There's a hole through which Our Lady's foot protrudes. Almost like Tara's foot protruding, it occurs to me. But and the foot is wooden, but the foot is somehow protected by a sock or something, I can't remember. And the pilgrims, year after year after year, the way people do in Spanish churches, they rub the foot of the Virgin and pass on. And I went through this progress, this climbing and coming back down. The statue meant nothing to me. There was no connection with the image, with its religious significance, but in a great sense, as I always have, with of identification with, of contact with the thousands and thousands and thousands of pilgrims who had made that climb and come back down again. I don't think I'd have been as clear as that at the time about it. Came down on the far side, lit a candle on the way out for my son, whom I was missing at the time. He'd moved out from home. And was he in college already then? May have that narrative wrong. Yes, he was. And lit a candle, and the candles were on a thing that they put candles on outside in a sheltered colonnade, and watched the candle blow in the wind, and felt a little bit sad for my son, and came down. It seemed hugely, I won't go too much into the significance of it, but it seemed very significant at the time. The point is that I phoned my sister in England a week or so later, and we chatted about this, that, and the other. And in passing, I told her about this and said I had some kind of experience up there. And immediately the questions started coming. What? How? Where? Tell me more. What was it? Was it this? Was it that? This was not part of our normal discourse. I had been investigating meditation, Buddhism really, Zen mostly, for about a year at that stage, I think, and had never spoken to Mary about it. And it came out in that conversation that she'd been searching around as well. Lo and behold, we discovered Buddhism independently at more or less the same time. She went to Wookey Hole, and in Yorkshire, isn't it? And through her agency, a few months later, I wound up in Padmaloka, the Triratna retreat house in Norfolk. How many minutes am I in now, Vajrashura, please? Roughly.
I'd say you're about 6 or 7.
Okay, thanks. Went there in some trepidation. I remember we made nervous jokes in the car as she was driving me there, that she might get a call from me if after 3 days of sleeping on a plank and being fed grains of rice and peas and subjected to being woken at all times in the night to pray, or whatever I thought was involved in being in a Buddhist retreat house, and that I could call her in the middle of the night if necessary. And in my imagination, there was this big high wall, and I would climb it on one side, throw my belongings over, land, and drive off into the fens, pursued by monks in orange robes streaming behind them. Nervous laughter. Needless to say, it wasn't like that. Everyone was extraordinarily kind. I told everybody they didn't really need to explain to me about meditation or Buddhism or anything. I'd read all about it. I knew. To this day, I blush to remember what a prat I made of myself, and how I was never made to feel that. I feel it now, but I saw nothing but kindness. I learned to meditate. It wasn't all easygoing. I had a resistance to puja ritual. I found on that occasion I didn't really get into it. I didn't light a candle until the very last evening, when the shrine room was empty and everyone else had gone. There was a holding back at that level, but at the same time, an absolute certainty that this was it. I remember coming home to Mary, and saying, "This is it. This is going to see me out." Now, I had no idea what this was. I blundered on, and I blush. I had blushing. There's a lot of blushing I could do. All the wrong views I expressed in Dharma study. The way I blundered into asking Vajrashura to be my preceptor without the least notion of the significance of that in his Dharma life. I don't think it had occurred to me to think about it from his point of view, which shows you how skillful I was and am, and much more besides, but I was in no doubt about then, from that very first visit to Padmaloka, about the happiness that was to be had. And that's how I described it to people when I came home. There is happiness, and you can turn it on like a tap. Was how it's. I wouldn't use those terms now, but that was the kind of language I used back then. Another dot on the map, Mitra ceremony, D, and myself. I hope she remembers it with the same little surge of emotion that I do. But at that stage, yeah, that's actually, I'm leaping ahead there because I held back from going into Dublin Buddhist Centre. I was in Padmaloka in Norfolk a couple of times before I set foot in the Dublin Buddhist Centre. I held back from integrating my Dharma life with the other life, which was a little bit public, the other life. I didn't feel able to explain to people what I was at. I still can't explain to people what I'm at, but I feel better about not being able to explain now. The integration had begun, though, because a few years before I was presenting the 6 o'clock news, 6-1 News at the time, and that's the most hectic job in. I'm very proud but if I allowed myself to be proud, yes, I'm very proud of having done a stint of the busiest broadcasting job in news anyway. And flying by the seat of your pants, avoiding disaster sometimes not avoiding it. And you come out quite often bathed in sweat, throw yourself down in the chair and try to remember who you are. And on one such evening, my dear friend Bill Barry, who is much more balanced in these matters and always was, completely oblivious to my state of confusion, turned to me and said, "Have you heard Goretzky's Third Symphony?" And he knew I was interested in music, but Goretzky's Third Symphony was the last thing I could think of in those circumstances. I was in another world. I was in the rough and tumble of journalism and broadcasting, and in that moment, it occurred to me that Goretzky's Third Symphony was, if not who I was, it was what I wanted to be. I wanted to be that. I wanted to live that life rather than the life I was in. So bit by bit, the two come together. I wind up in Dublin Buddhist Centre and make great friends. And you know the rest of it. The rest of my experience and yours overlaps hugely from this point on. I won't go through the highlights. I have the highlights down here, but I'm going to skip them. And that means not being grateful to some people who are listening here and some who are elsewhere. Gratitude will be for another day, for time constraints only. Another dot on the map is ordination, of course. And a little bit like the identification with the pilgrims in Montserrat. There's an echo of that in Gohyaloka. I don't want to talk in any detail about the ordination because there are people here who are going to be ordained. Many of you, I hope, are going to be ordained. And there is something of the magic of that is individual to everyone, and it shouldn't have my experience imposed on it. I will say, though, that there was a definite echo of the identification with pilgrims. I remember walking up a steep incline into a forest behind Vajrashura and seeing looking down at his feet and wearing sandals. I remember his very white ankles because he'd just come out from Dublin. I'd been out for the best part of a month at that stage. So his skin was perfectly white except for the mosquito bites. He'd been devoured the night before. But I had this definite sense of following someone into the forest, and that I was only one of countless people who had taken that path. And maybe that's as concrete an image as I have of going for refuge tonight. Anyway, that's probably the best I can do. It's been an erratic. I'm going to cut this short. It's been an erratic progress, but I'm not going to apologize for that, because Sangharakshita, in the history of my going for refuge, he doesn't quote Yeats, but he alludes to a poem by Yeats, which I looked up. It's always worth looking up Bante's allusions. The experience of reading him is so much richer if you follow up on the hints that he drops. Quotes Yeats, "Though logic choppers rule the town, and every man and maid and boy has marked a distant object down, an aimless joy is a pure joy. Or so did Tom O'Roughly say that saw the surges running by. And wisdom is a butterfly, and not a gloomy bird of prey." Wisdom is a butterfly, and Bhante applies that in the history of my going for refuge. He applies that to himself. For me, there could be no question of first clarifying an idea or concept and then acting upon it in its clarified form. An idea or concept was clarified in the process of its being acted upon. And I'm open to correction, but what that's saying to me, for me, what Bhante is saying to me, at least, there, is that the act of going for refuge is a commitment. It's a commitment. He defines it as a commitment. And a commitment is a once and for all thing. You say, I'm going to do this. But it's a once and for all thing that is an again and again and again for all thing. Because the very act of making the commitment changes you, changes your understanding of the commitment that you're making, and changes your understanding of the object, or makes clearer your understanding of the object of the commitment, of where you're heading, in other words. So the commitment is no sooner made than it has to be made again and again and again. It's a commitment that repeats itself, that draws you into a continuing process of commitment. It's no wonder that once you reach a certain stage where it's for real, it's irreversible. It goes on and on. It never stops. So I don't apologize for being a butterfly. I'm very grateful for having the map that Bhante had, because he wasn't just our splendid Red Admiral butterfly landing on every, butterflies apparently will land on every single square inch of a garden in a day. Every single square inch. I'm indebted to Akshobin, who saw that on a television program, the things we Buddhists talk about. And Bhante has been our butterfly. He's landed everywhere. He's made the survey. I'm very grateful to have it there. And you'll find this humble moth following the other side of his achievement, which is the path of regular steps, with renewed determination after hearing Dhammarathi this week. So you'll find me there pursuing the path of regular steps, but occasionally fluttering away into the flowering hedge. I may see you there.